Welcome to HortTube. My name is John Putnam. This is the garden question and answer video that I do pretty much every Sunday. You can ask gardening questions down in the comment section below this video, and that's where we pick from them each week. And I think Steph wrote down 25 from this past week. And thank you guys for participating. Without you, there's not a subscriber garden question and answer video. And you ask great questions each week, and a lot of them are relevant to things that are going on right now, or so occasionally we'll pick a few from the other videos that got asked multiple times, and that's kind of helpful as well. So thank you for participating. The weekly garden planner is $30 off through the month of July, and you use the code JULY to get that $30 off. We've worked hard on that thing for the last couple of weeks, and before you see the next question and answer after this one, both July is already up. August and September will be up, and we're actually starting to shoot October already as well. Some other things that are going to be added to that in the future. As we're doing anything from seed out here, all of those things will be on there. Anything that requires timing in your garden is going to be part of the weekly garden planner. And turf stuff is going to be on there too. So if there's anything you're doing to your turf, although we don't have any turf here, I actually did lawn care for a few years. I've done all parts of this business over the last 38 years. And so I've got, I can be helpful on most things. So turf related timing things are going to be added to it as well. So it's going to be just run the full gauntlet of if there's something that requires a specific timing in your garden, it will be in the weekly garden planner. There you go. The tour videos, I've started kind of a master tour video. We did this last summer, but we've added a ton of things. Even me, when I started that series of videos, I was like, it's going to be too similar to last year, maybe, but it's not at all. And a couple of things, this summer's been a little tougher than last year, and so I'm showing off all the problems that we've had because it's been dry. We've had 106-degree record temperature since the last time I filmed one of these. That was kind of wild, the highest recorded temperature ever at RDU Airport here, which is right down the road from us. And we're talking through, again, every plant in the garden. And there are hundreds and hundreds of plants that you can learn about over this series of videos. And I think we've shot 9 so far. I'm trying to hold them between about 20 and 30 minutes each. But if you go back to the first one, it's just full garden tour, and go back to part 1, which was a week and a half ago. I've done, by the time you're watching this one, I think the 4th one will be up. So the first one's just a drone video, and I walked the paths back here and just kind of generally show you the layout of the property. And then we jump in number 2, 3, and 4, and we're just going to, the entire front garden has been shot now, and every plant out there, and there's a ton of them. And again, showing off aphids, chewed leaves, things we need to prune. We didn't do any maintenance ahead of it so that we can show off everything and how to do it and how we think about the garden here in the middle of summer. And again, every plant that's out here, and it's a bunch of plants to learn about if you're interested in following along with that series. But it's not as similar to last year as you might think. It's so many new things out here in the garden. So thank you for following along with that. And then a couple things. I talked about raised beds in last week's Q&A video. And I just said that food is typically more nutrient dense down in actual soil than in raised beds. And I was somewhat critical of raised beds, but I also said that I think, there's a definite place for raised beds with, folks that have a hard time bending over, rocky soil, terrible soils that, slopes, that could be another thing where it make it difficult. And so there are lots of reasons why someone would have a raised bed. And I was in no way trying to shame anyone out of having raised beds. That wasn't the point at all. It was just more of an overall comparison between the two things and how one is easier to, just improving your soil if you can, and growing plants directly in the ground in the long term can be easier overall than raised beds. But it was not in any way, I've said this many times in these question and answer videos, I'm in no way trying to be the gatekeeper of gardening, nor do I want to be. Anything that gets you excited and makes it more convenient for you to garden makes me excited for you. Okay, so that's the truth. I want everybody active in gardening, as many people as we can, as many pollinator plants as we can, as many people growing their own food in their own gardens as we can, and bringing that kind of back into the, the norm, that being the normal thing. So again, just making sure that nobody took that, poorly in any way. And then anybody that was, had hurricane, I got a lot of followers in Texas, and so I hope everybody is okay from Hurricane Beryl. That was not that was a lot of flooding down there, and that's just the beginning of hurricane season. And we're over here on the eastern side of it, and have had many affect Raleigh over the years. So we know what that's like, and best of luck getting everything cleaned up if you had any damage from that. Hopefully you didn't. Let's see. Let's jump into some questions. Number one, so somebody has been landscaping this space for about 4 years, and they planted oak leaf hydrangeas along the tree line. It gets about 3 hours of sun a day, and they've had no flowers. And they were asking if it's too much shade or if it's too dry. Either one of those conditions could be the issue. The reasons you're not going to get flowers on your oak leaf hydrangeas are as follows. You're pruning it the wrong time of year because they bloom on old wood. And so they've had them this long, they probably know that. And if they know they're oak leaf hydrangeas, they know anything about them, they're probably not pruning them in the dead of winter. But if you are, that would be the problem. Definitely we can go too much shade on them and limit the amount of flowers we're getting. And definitely that combination with being dry could have a negative impact as well. This back line back here with the root competition is extremely dry. And it definitely, that combination of dry and too much shade on things can definitely have negative impacts. Be careful not to be trying to over push things too. I mean, that's, always a possibility that we overdo things. And one other thing just came to my mind is a late freeze or a late frost. The idea that would happen multiple years in a row is probably highly unlikely. But yes, it may be that you've got them in too much shade, and that combination with them being under drought stress, which are, oak leaf hydrangeas are really, really very capable native plants, but everything has its limits, right? Okay, number two. Before watching the channel, they bought a house that was covered with landscape fabric. They covered it with dirt and mulch, like a lot, 8 to 12 inches. They pull it out as they create as they create planting holes. So anytime they're digging somewhere and they find it, they do get it out. But the landscape has a huge swath of fabric still underneath it. Should they try to remove it all or just continue to pull it out plant by plant? This is such a hard question because obviously this is a giant undertaking to pull all of that plastic out. But for me, on a personal level, I would want it gone. And the reason I would want it gone is just because most of those fabrics are polyester, linen, polyester, some sort of plastic material. And they have limits. Any kind of plastic that you lay on the ground has a limit to how long before it starts to break down into smaller and smaller and smaller bits. And some of those fabrics are meant to last a long, long time, and then some of them are super inexpensive. When I did my first video on landscape fabric, the pros and cons of landscape fabric, I was being super subtle about trying to get people not to use landscape fabrics. But the material that I held up in that was a very thin material. And that was one of the big points that people made that were trying to defend landscape fabric was, that's a terrible fabric you're holding. Well, it was the one I could hold in my hand at the time. I knew what good landscape fabrics were at a nursery for 20 years, and we grew the plants on very heavy duty weed prevention, weed fabric. So I knew, I know the good from the bad. It's just this one I could hold in my hand. So it's amazing what little criticism, the little thing in the little thing in the video that somebody found to, to still defend landscape fabric. They're again, people will put it under paths. In that video on the positives, I said maybe under paths, maybe someplace where you're going to put gravel that you later may want to remove the gravel. Having that barrier between the soil and the gravel will make the gravel easier to remove. There are maybe some situations, but I just don't want to coat everything in plastic. I just don't know. I mean, you're the steward of your property, and you've in this case, this person inherited this problem. But I see around the neighborhood, and I should go film it at some point. There are several places in the neighborhood where the fabric fabric went down, some sort of landscaping happened, and it was never maintained in any way, and now pieces of fabric are sitting up all over the place, little bits of plastic. You can see it coming apart, you can see it breaking down, and that's the end game. At some point in the future, I don't know how well the fabric was made, it's going to break down, it's going to be microplastic. You know, I'd love for you to, I'm saying it's best to get it up, but I also know what kind of job it would be to, you know, have 8 inches of soil sitting on top of this plastic and try to remove it. It would be a bear. But, you know, I would probably tackle it, but I can imagine that a lot of people would not want to tackle it. But with you're going to get weeds on top of it, and I'm sure you are now. By this time, you're probably getting weeds on top of it. They're not preventing any weeds. It's just sitting there down in the ground, you know, hurting water, moving back and forth up and through. Anyway, a lot of words for that. Let's see. And again, I'm trying not to ever be the kind of some sort of gatekeeper of this, of any kind of gardening. If you want to put down landscape fabric and, you know, and put plants in the ground, go for it. But I think overall, in the long run, you will find you're still going to have weeds, and that barrier is going to prevent your soil from actually improving. Any ability for water and light to move through that fabric, which it's supposed to have, will eventually clog up and it won't work as well. Anytime I've ever removed that stuff, it really stinks underneath it. So you have anaerobic conditions created instead of positive microbes. You've got negative microbes, you know, that could cause problems to your plants. Just throwing all that stuff out. There you go. Somebody 3 years ago, they had a large tree removed. The roots were ground as much as possible. And about a 3x3 section where that tree was stays pretty wet, like muddy. And they want to know if it was related to the nearby roots. Besides wood chips, how can they improve the drainage? Really, it's getting the rest of that stump out if you can. I have, no matter how good the stump grinder is, and I sat there and watched the guy with the red maple in this front garden, you know, grind that thing out, there was still some pretty chunky material left down there. As they grind that stump, they lose visual sight of it, as you know, the ground material is piling up, and so basically, you know, it's a round drum basically hitting that stump. So they create a bowl in a large stump, and that pretty frequently happens. I don't think you can put wood chips there and see if you can get some microbial activity to help you break that material down a little faster, but I don't think it's going to be like a very good plantable space until more of that stump is ground out of that area. So you can get it ground out or wait more time for more of it to break down. But it's really hard with a stump grinder to grind a big giant stump out, because again, you just lose sight of it. That stuff just piles up, and then, you know, you run out of things to grind in a spot and go, I got it. But there's still chunks under the ground. And it's kind of worse at that point because you dig a hole in it. Let's see. Somebody planted a tree in a very heavily amended hole. They're in zone 3B, 4A. Wow. And to the point where it seems like a pot and water flows into the hole more. It's very windy where they are, and the tree literally rocks in the ground because of all the organic material. It's not anchored in the ground. What should they do? And I definitely think replant it. I think you got to pop that thing out of the ground, and highly, highly recommend anywhere anyone is planting to lightly amend your existing soil and not heavily amend. I get, you know, I've always got these questions like at the farmer's market or wherever. It's like, or somebody telling me, I threw all the clay away and then I put this bagged material back in its place. I'm like, well, that clay is actually, it's a pain, I know, to dig in, or whatever this material they have is a pain to dig in, but it is where the minerals are for the plant, and it also has more weight to it as well. So in this condition, obviously the tree is gonna stand up better. But I would replant it, but you may wanna wait until late summer. I don't know what your temperatures are or your conditions. If you're in the 70s or 80s, wherever this is in 3B or 4A, pop the thing out of the ground, replant it, less organic material, and then stake it as a backup precaution for a little while until it gets anchored in. Somebody says, seems like YouTubers push daily watering to create lush, thriving plants. Opinion on daily watering. Doesn't it baby the plants too much? The problem with, one of the issues with YouTube, and their gardening channels from all over the country and all over the world, is that if you're watching someone who lives in a desert or a seasonal desert, maybe they only get rain in the wintertime. You know, some of our West Coast areas, you know, it doesn't rain potentially 6-7 months out of the year. They're going to have to daily water in order to have something like this. If you're seeing something like this in a place where they go 6 or 7 months every year without it raining, they're having to water every day. Potentially, you know, obviously soil temperature, even in those areas, it's possible they can skip some time depending on conditions. But here in my area, I would never have to water anything daily except for maybe a container, especially as late summer comes on. You know, the containers can be more of a almost burden, you know, by late summer. But nothing else in this garden. It's rained. It's interesting because 3 weeks ago, leading up to the open garden, we had very low humidity. It's very unusual for us. So we had days in the 90s, light breezes. We don't get a lot of wind here. Somebody said in a video a week ago, oh my God, it looks like wind. I never see wind there. We're protected by the Appalachian Mountains a bit from one side, and then the wind doesn't come off the coast this far. So, you know, we sit in a pocket here where we have wind, but we don't have it. It's not constant for sure. But we were having breeze, 90-degree days, and low humidity. That was the kind of conditions where after 3 weeks, I was watering closer to daily for sure. That's for sure. But then we've now hit a stride where I am sweating right now. It's 93, 94, and it's probably 80% humidity. It's cloudy mid-afternoon because the storms are building, and it is muggy. But these plants can drink, you know, from this thick, muggy air that I'm standing in out here. It's like I'm talking to you from a bathtub right now. But these plants are able to get some of that water out of the air. And so it's just a different, still 90, but without the breeze and with the humidity, I don't have to water hardly at all. And except, again, containers, because they're up above the ground and they're not down in the ground. But it's only really rained, I would say 2.5 times. And the 0.5 was just a brief shower in the last week and a half, but I haven't had to water that entire time. We've drug the hoses out here on the path for a few containers that have been watered, and this container got planted earlier, but that's it. So when you see someone pushing daily watering, keep in mind, they're not necessarily pushing daily watering. It may be literally what they have to do based on their conditions in their area of the country. So it's an interesting thing having YouTubers, you know, all over the country. And that's what the main thing I want you to get from this channel. There are definitely plants in this garden that you can all grow. And if you follow that tour video that I'm doing, which is all about plants, and I mentioned in the first video, the first one with the plants, so that would be part 2, that the plants are kind of the icing. And it's fun to talk about the icing. You know, they're the icing on the cake. But the main thing from this channel I would want you to get is the soil prep is the same no matter where you live. The soil prep's the same. And that soil prep is going to hopefully lead you to less watering regardless of where you are in the country overall. And also just healthier plants overall. That's the one thing you can get from my channel that hopefully everybody could get something out of. But you're not necessarily going to, me teaching you how to water in, you know, the middle of California somewhere is not going to be helpful necessarily to you for your conditions in July. And then in January, you have very, very different conditions. You're during your wet season. So again, a lot of words. That's just question number 5. But watering is going to be different for everyone. And I put up a video about, I called it sudden plant death, that a lot of you have watched. It's got a lot of views on it. And in that video I'm talking about, it's the hardest thing to learn because everybody's is different. I just don't think, unless you're learning watering directly from me and you live down the street somewhere, or directly from that other YouTuber and you live near them, then they're not going to be able to teach you how to water in your garden in your part of the country. So keep that in mind. We have to do a lot less watering here in the muggy South. That's my point. But it is muggy. So, you know, one gift, that's a gift on this side and it's taken away on the other when you walk out the door in the morning. And it's 81 degrees and it's like a soup outside. Would a rejuvenational prune or reset of a meatball massacre help, and when to do it? So they have some ligustrums that have been meatballed over and over and over again, just turned into small. Can they help them by just go ahead and cutting them to the ground? Yes, for sure. But you would want to do that. They have 100-degree weather. So I would definitely, you can continue to do whatever light pruning you normally do on them. But if you're going to cut them basically to the ground, I would probably wait till February or March to do that of next year. That would be the best time to do it. And then it'll give them all season to come back out of that and resettle. If you cut anything, ligustrum ain't gonna die from your pruning, so it ain't necessarily related to this person, but most things out here, if I cut them to the ground too late in the summer, they will they'll flush and grow, and then they'll be, you know, as the summer kind of comes to an end in the days, we passed the longest day of the year, and the days are getting shorter again, and the plants know that, and they start to wind down in the late summer, early fall. If you prune things heavily too late in the summer, they're now growing at a time when everything else knows it needs to be going to sleep, if that makes any sense. And so those are the kind of things that are in a weekly garden planner, actually. But stop pruning. This is the latest I would do heavy pruning. I would continue to do small pruning, deadheading, annuals, perennials, you know, a crazy limb on something that needs to be pruned. Go ahead and do that whenever, but we do have those kinds of things on the weekly garden planner. Hey, don't stop your heavy pruning at this point, because you're going to put the plants in a weird, out of balance type of situation. Somebody's in 7B, Tennessee. They have super petunias. How do we like ours? We don't have any super petunias, but I do have a few petunias, wave petunias this year. Some of the new improved wave petunias and the super petunias, and there's so many new series of annuals out there. And I know a lot of people. I know there's a lot of information on YouTube about super petunias. They've been well promoted, and there are some of the great varieties. I know that bubblegum one everybody grows. Do they need more fertilizer? Yes, in general, petunias are needier than some other annuals, and I know people do a lot more, and that's one of the reasons that I don't do a lot of petunias, because they, you know, as I look at my petunias back there, they're all in bloom, and I've got them in a couple containers, and there'll be like video coming up, one of the tour videos, maybe this next week, in a container in the front garden. Mine have a few less flowers than the people who are fertilizing them every week, for sure, but that's just not, so that kind of rules things out for me sometimes, is the amount of maintenance I'm going to have to do to them in order to have them look a certain way. The other part of this channel, beyond learning about soil, is, you know, my limited fertilizing regimen and my trying to do things inexpensively as possible. So a lot of the annuals I choose are also ones that I can do from seed, and I can acquire the seed on to produce. Okay, somebody is planning for fall garden on the Outer Banks, Zone 8B, best vegetable plants and when to start them. So you can start at the beginning of August. If you're doing things from seed in the house and you're going to put them as plants into the garden, your direct seeding down there for your fall vegetable garden would probably start around mid to late August, something like that, if you're seeding them directly in the ground. But there's a ton of things in Zone 8 where we are that we can grow in the ground in the fall. So beets and turnips and carrots and broccoli and cauliflower and kale and collards and lettuce, and my goodness, there's so many cool season vegetables. And I have a cool season vegetable planting chart on the weekly garden planner, and you can see the ones and when the timing is to put them in. I think it's on the Learn to Garden video series too. I think I included it over there as well. The timing for seed, for when you start certain seeds, whether they're the three different ways you can do it, right? You can put seed directly in the ground. That's one timing that would be a time. Starting the seed in the house, if you're going to put them in the ground as plants later, that'd be a different kind of timing. Or buying the plants from a store and putting them directly in the ground, you know, maybe a different timing as well. But anyway, there you go. Somebody wants to add sand, or they're asking, can they add sand to clay for drainage, or should they use soil conditioner? What is the best to improve drainage? I just mix soil conditioner in with the planting holes as we go. If you go back to my clay planting video, that's all I did in that clay planting video. And I went through and showed all the other bagged things that might be recommended. You know, it might be peat moss, might be sand, it might be all kinds of other things, and kind of went through, that video is a long time ago. It's probably 6 years ago now. It has near 1 million views, but a lot of you watching me found me through that clay planting video. But I really do break it down and talk about the clay's not that bad. And if you're gonna mix anything in with it, a little bit of compost or a little bit of pine bark soil conditioner is kind of ideal. I would not mix sand in it to create drainage. Here's the problem. If you take a small amount of sand, think about the difference between clay and sand is clay is very, very fine. Each individual piece of rock dust basically is incredibly fine. And that's what allows it to compact together and become this really tight, compact thing. It actually has a lot of air in it. Believe it or not, unless your machine goes and squeezes it down and that kind of thing. It actually does have a good amount of air in it. It just has a different texture and feel because it's so fine, where sand is more coarse, okay? If you mix a small amount of sand into clay, the clay particles will fill in all the gaps between the sand and actually create a more compact soil, believe it or not. The only time it becomes beneficial is if you put 1-to-1 sand to clay. There is a point where the sand overcomes clay's ability to clog it up, and that's at 1-to-1. And I've read this a bunch of times over the years in tests. So how much clay do you have? You have a foot of clay below your feet, because you're gonna need a foot of sand in order to mix that in and have that actually change the soil to a loam, something that's in between sand and clay. So that's almost an impossibility to put whatever amount of clay you've got to equal amount of sand. It seems impractical, but a small amount of sand will actually make problems potentially worse. After we shoot this video, I'm flipping my potato bags over there, seeing if we have any potatoes. It's always a fun day flipping those over and seeing what you have, what you've been able to grow during the season. So I'm looking forward to that. I love fresh potatoes, highly recommend growing potatoes. There's potato videos on the channel if you go back and search on the channel. So when we ordered shirts, and there's 6 or 7 different designs over on the website. When we ordered them, they told us the mix of the things to order, and we ordered them that way, and it was nowhere near the right way. And so we sold out of a lot of the larger sizes right out of the gate, and have a lot of the smaller ones. But we've reordered all the larger ones, and they're going to be here this week. And the website has been updated. So if you're interested in any of the t-shirts, the conifer collector, ACA, plant collector, and the plant collector is going to be available in blue. It's been on kind of an off-white shirt. The new one's going to be baby blue. There's not a picture of it yet on the website because I haven't gotten it in my hand yet, but I've seen the photo of it. It looks great. The holly t-shirt, all of them, and they're available in larger sizes than we previously had. If you're interested in buying any of the t-shirts over on the website, or have been waiting for us to restock or whatever, we'll have them this week. Steph will ship them as soon as we have them in, if you're ordering them in the next few days. Okay, and videos for this upcoming week. The tour video is going to continue probably for a month and a half to show every plant in this garden. There will be some other videos in there. I did a video down on the Gulf Coast last week, or week before last at this point, I don't even remember now, that I haven't edited and put up yet. I did a container planting video today that'll go up. There's going to be intermittent other videos in between the tour video coming. Okay, question number 10. Wow, I'm moving slow. I'm really running my mouth this week, right? Let's see. So somebody then said, is a 6-inch raised bed with no bottom considered a raised bed, or no-till garden beds? They're thinking the plants will root into the lower soil anyway. My annual beds are that way. I mean, this is how we do annuals. We're basically putting compost and bark on top of the existing soil and putting them into that, and then they have access to the soil down below to get nutrients. So it's not really a raised bed, it's just kind of a contained. Mine is a non-contained version of the exact same thing you're doing, is where all of our annuals are being grown. So if you're watching these tour videos, all those annuals are happy out there in basically a non-contained low raised bed. That's what we'll call it. Somebody said, where is Rosalinda? Can't find it. So the Rosalinda Indian Hawthorn, it's in the front garden. It'll be coming up in one of the tour videos this week or next. They just can't find it. This is just an ongoing thing. I think this next year you're going to find plants that you haven't been able to find for the last 3 or 4 years. I think there's a definite slowdown happening, and I know there's a slowdown happening. I'm talking to a lot of nurserymen on a weekly basis, and I know there's a slowdown happening, which sounds bad for them, but it also is going to be a moment where we can get some fabric covered. I've been putting my drone up over nurseries for 4 years and seeing just empty fabric and plastic and gravel everywhere. You guys and others have bought plants faster than anyone could ever produce them, and everyone's been predicting a downturn. So not only were the nurseries not growing enough, they were also going, well, this can't last another year. We're going to be down 5% next year. So they were growing less over the time too, just predicting that this was going to come at some point. It finally has. We're in a bit of a slowdown right this minute. But I think more of the plants that you're looking for are going to be more available next year. That's the point of all that. Let's see. Okay, so somebody said they have an extensive perennial and annual garden up in Madison, Wisconsin. They bought a wood chipper. They have twigs that are up to about 1.75 inches that they're going to be chipping. Are they as good as arborist wood chips? So the whole sticks that have kind of lost all of their water weight over time are definitely not as good as the arborist wood chips, but they're not bad either. It's still organic material, but they'll definitely break down a little bit slower. They need the green parts of the tree mixed in to be as good as arborist wood chips. So the arborist wood chips, and I'm standing on them now in this path, it's all the parts of the tree. So the tree person went and cut down the tree. They put the limbs, the leaves, the trunk, and everything through that chipper, and then brought it here to the house. And so it has the green parts of the tree and the brown parts of the tree. So any of your green materials that are going through the chipper, meaning still alive, kind of, you cut them off the plant and they're still alive, technically, and then you run them through the chipper, those are the things that are the closest to arborist chips. The pile of sticks that you have that's been drying for 2 years and you want to run those through the chipper are not going to break down as fast, but they're still very valuable and can be used in a compost bin. You'll just want to add some greens to it. Some cut grass would be grass clippings, easy for me to say, something like that, or your annuals as you're pulling them out of the ground at the end of the season, perennials that you're cutting back. All of that material will help that old brown stuff get the green material that it needs to get that fire going in your compost. There you go. Sometimes I can say things with less words than I think. Somebody asked why their sweet bay magnolia seedlings are so hard to transplant. They're very small, I think, in the description. If you're having trouble transplant, some things have tap roots, and that's not going to be the sweet bay magnolia and can be problematic for different kinds of reasons. But sometimes just the size of something can make it less likely to transplant well. And so you might want to take your seedlings and grow them out for an additional season. Get them slightly woody and less of that new material, fresh material, and put a little age on them before you put them in the ground and see if that helps. Let's see. Oh, somebody just said they had bought some salvias and had lost a couple of them over a few days. They were declining and dropping buds and blah, just going through. And they said, basically, am I bad at this? No. It's within the realm of possibility sometimes that you can go and buy something that just wasn't in great condition when you bought it. Or you bring it home and you forget to water it for 2 days. Or you put it in a place that was too wet. Or you put it in, all kinds of scenarios can happen. But learning from dying and fading plants and problems that you have in the garden are what's actually going to teach you over time. So you're not bad. No one is innately bad or innately good at gardening. Everyone is capable of learning and observing and gaining what they need for their space, because again, every place is different, water-wise, soil-wise, all those kinds of things. But everyone's capable. It's just observation. Observe your garden pretty consistently, and you'll get a lot out of that over time. Let's see. And you are not a bad gardener. Let's see. Somebody bought a clearance variegated Japanese Aurelia or Fatsia japonica. Should they plant it now or in the fall or overwinter it inside? We're right on the edge. This was in, I think, my area here in Raleigh. We're right on the edge of where Fatsia is kind of hardy. I would, if it were me and on these humid days and you're putting it in a part shade spot that's slightly protected, I might go ahead and put it in the ground right now. I planted mine in the fall and then it got just absolutely nuked. But then I don't want to overwinter something that's marginal either. I know bringing it in the house is not going to be enough light. So for me, the best of those three scenarios, I'm probably going to put it in the ground right now and get it somewhat established before cold weather approaches. Will a hellebore overwinter in a pot? Should they put it in an unheated garage or plant it? I don't know what zone they were in, but most hellebores are incredibly cold tolerant. So I could take a 1 gallon hellebore here in zone 8 in a 1 gallon container and set it right here and be fairly certain it's going to live through the winter in the container without even thinking about it, other than making sure it's moist, which my winters stay moist. So I don't even think I'd have to think about it at all the entire winter. So I don't know where they are. If you're on the coldest extremes of where that hellebore is hardy, you may need to put it in the garage for some part of the winter. So again, I just don't know where the person is, but hellebores, these things that are, if it's about 2 zones hardier than your area, take for example, the boxwood that was in the container over there that I believe you could see at the beginning of the video, that boxwood's zone 5 hardy, and I'm in zone 8A. I can leave that boxwood in that container through the winter, and I'm not, you know, it's possible it could get hurt, but highly unlikely that it would get hurt. So just depends on where you live and what the plant is as to whether or not you have to protect it more or less during the winter time. Any organic fertilizers pets won't want to lick. We use, so definitely all the granular organic fertilizers are definitely, the dogs want to be, they're all about them. I think everybody's dogs love that material. You can switch to a liquid though, and then you can water after you do the liquid. Get a liquid organic fertilizer, mix it, pour it onto your plants, and then take the water hose and water once. And that should take care of that a bit better than the granular material that stays granular for a little while. Okay, let's see. Somebody says they're in 7B, Oklahoma, wants ideas for a shrub that will bloom 3 to 4 times per year. They say Allegheny viburnum blooms several times a year for them. And there are viburnum's a big group of plants, so generalizing viburnum's impossible. There's evergreen ones, you know, grow like trees, small evergreen one here, deciduous viburnum, fragrant ones, non-fragrant ones, native ones, non-native ones, big group of plants, right? But so generalizing viburnum, but viburnum, there are several viburnum that are more likely to bloom multiple times a year. I've got my Chinese evergreen viburnum back here, blooms spring and fall. My viburnum obovatum, which is a native viburnum, blooms 6-7 months out of the year, almost consistently 6 or 7 months out of the year. So there are some viburnum that repeat bloom like that. So this Allegheny viburnum, it's not surprising that you would have one that would bloom multiple times. But if I could find a plant that would consistently bloom 3 to 4 times a year, I would not be talking to this camera right now. Probably. I'd be out on my boat. No, I would never be out on a boat anywhere or acting like that in any way. But I'm just kind of saying I'd be very rich for sure if I had, if I could find several plants that would bloom 3 to 4 months out of the year. And that's, you know, one of the things, you know, the thing of teaching on the channel, and you know, something that's in that weekly garden plan, another thing that's in the weekly garden planner is about consistently shopping throughout the year so that your garden will kind of unfold throughout the year. And we have very early flowering things like this Weigela next to me and this Laura petalum behind me, but then I got an osmanthus right there that blooms in the winter. I got a hydrangea over there that blooms in, you know, May and June. It's still got flower. It's probably out of frame. There's a salvia right there that will bloom all summer, impatiens that'll bloom all summer, distilium that bloom much earlier in the year, mahonia that blooms in the winter time in January, encore azalea back there. They are repeat blooming azaleas, spring and fall. So my point of all of that is that this garden just kind of unfolds during the year. So that's be my biggest recommendation for wherever you are in the United States, is to go shopping several times a year and just buy 1-2 things, kind of fun, bring them home, put them in, go back in a month or two, see what's flowering in your area at that time, go to a botanic garden, And you can have a garden that appears to bloom consistently the entire year. And then, you know, one thing fades, one thing comes in. You know, that's the nice thing about that. Somebody asked if they need to deadhead gomphrena for a second flush after they stretch and fade. Yes, we're pruning our gomphrena in the front garden as we're doing the tour videos. Steph was literally, we're filming a tour video in the morning, talking through in that video all the things that we need to do, and then she's doing them behind us while I go in and start editing a video. That's how we've been operating. But yes, any of your annuals that have gotten, a lot of your annuals can be pruned, and to get a second flush out of them. Let's see. So again, I got a lot of questions on the vinca from that first video. We have tremendous amount of vinca out in the front garden. The tattoo series and several other series of vinca that are just bulletproof out in the front garden. But when I said that, people are like, well, hold on, I get disease problems in my vinca. If you've grown vinca for more than a decade, you know that Phytophthora type root rot really damaged vinca very badly. There were disease issues in vinca and other annuals, impatiens as well, and several other annuals that got disease problems that just came through and made them not fun to grow. Let's just put it that way. And this is the way this works. And I'm actually literally giving a talk on Sunday in Columbus, Ohio at Cultivate on this exact same topic of plants that have been reintroduced in a better version than they were previously. But then how do we communicate to the world that the plant's been improved in some way? Because that person's had a bad experience with it, or they've been told, or the internet told them not to grow it, or whatever. It's really hard because almost across the board, every plant that you can tell me why you wouldn't want to grow it, I can tell you why you would want to grow the new one, because plant breeders are hard at work fixing these things. And vinca has now been, at least this one problem has been fixed for now, and I highly recommend any of those new series of vinca that are on the market. They're just they're so easy, and they don't have to be, they're self-cleaning, so on and so forth. But I got that a lot, was my vinca always dies. But again, that's what I'm giving a talk about this just a few days. So kind of interesting. Oh, about the time you guys are watching this is when I'm delivering that talk, actually. Okay. So somebody has a big giant weedy area with honeysuckle and poison ivy, and you know, they have like 5 acres up in Ohio. How to they whack it back and it just keeps coming right back. Any ideas? You really do have to go through and you know, I'm always talking about getting to the starting line. And so, you know, whatever your feelings are on using chemicals or machines or whatever it is, doesn't matter what it is, you have to get to the starting line. So use the tools that are available, and you get that stuff cut down, and then get it sprayed and get it killed, and you know, and then you know, so something that's, you know, some sort of poison ivy killer, right? And then get that stuff killed back completely. Get the area wood chipped or mulch so it doesn't keep coming back on you, and get to the starting line. I mean, that's what those tools are that's what those tools are on the market for, right? If you just keep cutting it down and it keeps coming back, you're never going to get to the starting line of being able to have any fun gardening. So throw the world at it. This is my point. Any of those kinds of problems, throw the world at it and get it done. Get it out of the way. Hire someone, whatever it takes, and get yourself to the starting line, so that then you can move forward and have fun gardening. Another question that happens to be about include oak leaf hydrangea. They've gotten tons of rain for over a month, and now it's hot and dry. They planted it near a tree and a brick wall. Now it just droops. How to prevent sudden death. And I talked about this sudden death season this time of year, where it's really sometimes hard to figure out if you've overwatered something or underwatered something or what's going on. The plants are just more vulnerable at this time of year to succumb to insect problems, disease problems, root rot issues, that's a disease problem, and just general and another thing we've been talking about in these tour videos out there, if you want to get back in and catch up with them, that, you know, we've got some off coloration in a few leaves, and I think the plants are slightly malfunctioning a bit, because even if the nutrients are available in the soil, when it hits 106 degrees outside and that plant's not from a place where it gets 106 degrees, it's going to malfunction a bit, right? It's not going to be able to get the iron or phosphorus or potassium. Things aren't going to work just right when these conditions are all over the place. Wet, dry, hot, you know, whatever. Really, these nighttime temperatures are the scariest thing to me. I mean, we have had multiple days where it has not fallen below 80 degrees at night. That's not good. That's not good at all. And plants grow at night. It's when they need to take a minute, breathe, get the water built back up, and then put on a little bit of growth, build new flower buds, all those kinds of things. 80 doesn't give them a break. You know, it's probably 90 up until 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock at night before it's even dropping below 90. So a little concerning in that regard. Be careful not to overwater your oak leaf hydrangea. It knows what it's doing. It puts those leaves down in wilts in the afternoon, so that, think about these leaves as solar panels. It knows when to take the solar panels down, right? And then wilt a bit in the late afternoon. Let the daylight end and see if it's perking back up. And if it's perking back up, it's fine. If it's not perking back up, it may need some water, and you can dig around it and confirm that before you water it. But don't panic water it, or you will end up with the sudden death of your oak leaf hydrangea for sure, or possibly. Somebody has white wedding hydrangea fried in the late afternoon sun in the Pacific Northwest. Is it in the wrong place? They're incredibly heat tolerant. In the tour video we shot this morning, I have one at the end of the driveway, abused in every way possible, hottest place in this garden. It's right beside the road, and it has not burned like that on me. But if I'd have put it out there and then gotten this particular summer on it right after I had planted it, it's within the realm of possibility it would have had some burn on it. It's out of balance. It can't get water up into the leaves fast enough, so the leaves are sunburning on it before it can fix it. So sometimes if you put a plant in and you see it's kind of getting crispy like that real quick, you may want to pull it back out, put it in a pot, put it in some part shade, let the temperatures and let things moderate a bit around it, put it back in the fall maybe, whatever it takes. But if it had a season under its belt, your Hydrangea paniculata would be able to tolerate the full sun of the Pacific Northwest for sure. Last question for this week. This person has a reblooming azalea, one of the proven winners ones. It's been dry, and a neighbor trimmed a tree and added some additional sun exposure on it. It's frying. What should they do? Should they move it or wait to see if it roots in? These are hard decisions, but sometimes if it hasn't been in the ground very long, you can pop it out of the ground, just like I just said on the other, on the white wedding hydrangea, and put it to the side and re-put it in the fall. But these repeat blooming azaleas, whether it's the encore azaleas back here or any of them, the breeding that's in those azaleas actually make them quite a bit more sun tolerant overall than our traditional azaleas. It's just the rhododendron they used to mix with the traditional azaleas is a very sun tolerant, heat tolerant plant. Weirdly hairy beast, rhododendron ohamii, strange plant. Not a great flowering azalea in any way, but it allowed it mixed with other azaleas gives you fall blooming azaleas, but they're actually more sun tolerant overall. But anytime you have something that wasn't in the sun and now it is in the sun, it's likely to burn. It's like I've said many times about staying in the house in the winter, and my skin gets whiter and whiter and whiter, and then I go to the beach and I get burned easily. So that's what happened obviously with your plant, but it's actually capable of adapting to that, and I'll let you make the decision of whether you want to rescue it for temporarily and then put it, but I would come back and put it right back in the same place if you do the rescue, or, you know, a little bit of burn on the top of it's not the worst thing that could ever happen to something. It'll recover from a small amount of burned leaves on the top of it. So there you go. Thank you guys very much for following along. By the time you're watching this, I've been in Ohio for 3 days and almost on my way back already. And don't forget the weekly garden planner is $30 off over on the website. Thank you guys who have bought it and are considering it. And thank you very much.